Hello, fellow Minecrafters. Gearsaw Studios here. Today I'm going to show off Minecraft 1.18. That's right, 1.18, the Caves and Cliffs Part 2 update is finally out. However, before I investigate, remember, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out. So, with that, let's investigate. So, here we are on Reddit, and we can see it's actually out, which is incredibly fortunate. So, giving it a quick upvote because this is a great update, and you can see a lot of things are going on. In fact, I could scroll down here for probably an entire minute because this update's incredibly large. And this doesn't even include the bug fixes part. Well, it's actually not that long, it's just there's a lot of comments. But this is a huge update, so I'm not going to really scroll through it too much. But either way, it completely revamps world generation. So the world is 50% taller, so 64 blocks on top, 64 blocks on bottom. And everything below zero is deep slate, which means we can have bigger caves with the bigger underground space. So let's look in game. So here we are on a freshly generated world for 1.18, and you'll immediately notice some stuff. And that's the crazy terrain over here, just being a normal plains biome, and the caves. So in this update, we now have aquifers, which are water caves, and they can be on the surface too, which means the little water lakes that you know and probably hate have been removed because these are just better now. They can also pour out, and the caves are far, far larger, and they can be extremely extensive. And remember, the world height has been increased, so we can go extra deep. Down here, we can go very deep to the negatives, which is pretty crazy, but this also means performance issues might become a little more prevalent. So, now with all this generation, this means that glow squids are going to be more common in these huge water caves. Amethyst geodes now generate super deep down, and just a whole plethora of changes. But back on the surface, we have the caves clearly being seen, and we can also notice something. That now extreme hills are just a little bit smaller, because there's something to take their place. So, locating a biome, and Jagged Peaks is one of the new biomes. So if we teleport there, we can sometimes find extremely tall mountains. And here we have a valley in between, and there's many biomes that make this up. So down here we have the meadows, which have a lot of flowers and occasionally have a tree, which will always have a beehive, and is always oak or birch. These are the Jagged Peaks, and they are just tall and have emeralds and such. They also have a lot of snow, and bordering it is the Grove biome. It's pretty much a spruce forest and an ice spikes combined, without the ice spikes and instead trees, but it has powder snow, our newest threat to the game. So, scanning through here, it's not too prevalent because, of course, we're in a pretty jagged area. But over here, there's some powder snow. And this was added in 1.17, but now it's a true threat. So you're going to have to wear leather boots. Because if you don't, you're just going to start sinking and you'll take freezing damage. So make sure to put on your leather boots so that way you can survive it. For our other new additions for the game, we have the Frozen Peaks, the colder version of the Jagged Peaks. They're typically smoother and they're easier to traverse. But they also have goats. Goats were already added, but they can ram you off things, so be careful of them. This biome just has a lot of snow blocks, some ice here and there, and a lot of packed ice. So icebergs and ice spikes are a little bit safer because these are the new victims for ice mining. Along with that, another biome, which is the Grove, basically the same thing but without trees and dirt, is the Snowy Slopes. So, here we have the Snowy Slopes biome, and of course, it has a lot of powder snow, so beware. Along with that, we can have bigger rivers now, so boats are an easier way to transport yourself across bodies of water, since they're less likely to choke out at areas. So, you can have a giant boat in the river now, which is a nice change. Now, we had those two mountains. We had the snowy mountains, so the frozen peaks, and the jagged peaks, which were just the temperate ones. Over here, we have a small example of the hot ones, which are the Stony Peaks. Stony Peaks don't have any passive mobs, not even goats, and they typically like bordering jungles and savannas. These places have a lot of coal and iron due to their elevation, because ores have been completely reworked. Along with that, amethyst geodes are now blessed, as this place now has a crap ton of calcite. So, ever liked calcite? This is the place to go. Along with that, sometimes they border other mountains, which go into different climate regions, such as over here into the frozen peaks and the grove biome. So, a lot of new mountain biomes and a pretty good example of a meadow here, which has horses, sheep, and donkeys. So, all these mountain things are cool, but what about how the other biomes work? Because they are slightly different, you may have noticed. So, pressing F3, you might notice something now. And that's the Biome Builder and the Terrain PV. So the Biome Builder chooses where the mountains and the rivers and the oceans are going to go, and has some role in the other biomes like Badlands. So you can see this is considered a peak, but as I move away from it, it's just saying high, because this is a pretty high up area. And once I go to the coast, it says mid, low, and then ocean. Well, there's also those numbers that generate how high stuff is. So, just a lot of number stuff, and those determine where biomes are now. So, those of you who are looking for a certain biome, you are not going to find it near certain other biomes anymore. So, no more plains biomes bordering warm oceans, as that's now only the desert and badlands thing. Same thing with deserts bordering frozen oceans. That's not going to happen anymore. So, it's just a lot more realistic. So, some of your biomes may have been removed, but some other biomes have gotten bigger, such as the jungle edge, which has been renamed to the Sparse Jungle. So, here in the normal jungle, this looks like a jungle hills or a modified jungle, but upon further inspection, it's just a normal jungle. That's because every single hills biome, except the savanna plateau, has been removed from the game, because now that multi-noise thing generates how high or low things are. So that way we can have more diversity in biomes without having a ton of hill biomes. So that doesn't mean too much, except your locate commands are going to be a little bit easier to control. So the surface is looking absolutely amazing, and that's a lot of the things about the cliffs. But what about the caves? Occasionally, looking on the surface, you'll find some azalea trees, and when you find them, they signify something, and you can easily dig through the rooted dirt they have under to eventually find the lush caves biome, which was added, but it was only within the code, so you could only generate single biome stuff. So this means that there's cave biomes now, and what that means is you're going to have a lot funner caving experience with mossy caves with the glowberries. Along with that, there's a different variant. So, doing a locate biome command, there's the dripstone caves. And the dripstone caves are pretty much what you think they are. The dripstone blocks added in 1.17 now have their own cave. So, looking at this, there's a lot of dripstone, and a lot of dripstone points, which makes this a pretty pointy biome. So be careful, because a lot of fall damage might happen here, and ground can spawn in aquifers. So if you're too close to the water, a stray trident might hit the ceiling above you and cause a stalactite to come crashing down upon you. So be careful. Fortunately, in this biome, it's not all doom and gloom, because what happens in this biome is a lot more copper generates. So looking at these copper veins, there's a lot of copper. So your copper roof will be very easy to complete if you find one of these biomes. Along with that, copper now, instead of dropping 1 to 3 raw copper, drops 2 to 5 raw copper. So you get more. And another unique thing they've done, so I have to grab a stone cutter for this, is when you use copper blocks in a stone cutter, so grabbing one of those, you now get 4 cut copper. So those of you who like cut copper, you can now get a lot more of it. So overall, copper is a lot easier to get. Although the dripstone caves seem cool with their copper, the lush caves aren't left out. Although they don't have increased ore spawns for anything, they have axolotls. And no longer will axolotls spawn in just normal water. So ocean caves are no longer your blessing for axolotls. Instead, you have to slowly traverse these lush caves, waiting for one to spawn. Along with that, these lush caves have a lot of drip leaf blocks. So, a lot of big drip leaf, some small drip leaf, so you don't have to wait for the annoying wandering trader to show up. A crap ton of moss, so moss farm's not necessary for your mossy build. Azalea bushes, and way too much clay, which is incredibly handy because clay is currently pretty difficult to obtain until now. Along with that, you might occasionally find a spore blossom, which does pretty much nothing, but it creates particles and it looks cool. Now, the world generation's cool and all, and before I get onto the other details, there's 3 new advancements, and for Bedrock users, you're going to have achievements. So Xbox, PlayStation, mobile, and Windows 10 players, you probably aren't going to get accurate information from this part. So one of them is called Star Trader. So all you have to do is go to the new world height 320, not 256, and trade with a villager. Pretty simple. Then another one called Caves and Cliffs. So what you have to do is go to height 320 or go higher and fall into a square of water. That happens to be at negative 64 or a similar height. So you want to fall just about 400 blocks, and that's all you have to do for this achievement. So it's a lot simpler than it sounds, because all you have to do is get an elytra and go into some water. Then, Sound of Music, go to the Meadows biome, and just play a jukebox. Pretty simple. And the last one, which is in the Nether tab, is Feels Like Home. So what you have to do is, in a straight line, you have to ride a strider in the overworld. So, pretty simple, besides getting the strider to overworld and finding enough lava for that. So, that's all the advancements for 1.18. Bedrock Edition, there's different ones for you. 2 other things I have to mention is that villages can generate in the new Meadows biome, and pillager outposts can generate in all the new biomes except the cave biomes that they've added. And there's a new music disc composed by the composer of Big Step, Lena Rain. So this is called Other Side, and it's a pretty cool looking disc. So how you get it is about an enchanted golden apple chance from dungeons or stronghold chests, and it's only the hallway chests for the strongholds. So it's a very rare disc. You cannot get it through creepers and skeletons. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I'll just give you a quick preview. So, it's quite a long song at about 3 minutes, but it's a very relaxing song. So, I recommend listening to it in game. So, in game, we're looking at this mountain, which happens to have a big dripstone cave inside. And although they do contain a lot of copper, you're noticing that there's not too much copper, because this is the wrong height. Instead, we can see some emeralds from the mountain above because we're very high up, and a lot of coal, and a decent amount of iron if you look closely. Of course, you're still going to get your copper because it's a dripstone cave, but remember, height matters now, instead of just having one all-purpose layer. So, let's look at each individual layer and see how much you'll get from it. So for the other main thing, we have the ore generation now. So it's been completely revamped. Over here we have 1.17, so pretty simple here. And of course, it's very square, and it's quite obvious where to go for everything. Just go right about here, except for copper. But with 1.18, we have quite the different thing. You have to make trade-offs for various things. So your main objective is to go to certain layers to get certain ores. So about -59 is where you get redstone and diamonds, with the small amounts of gold, lapis, and iron. Then, if you go a little bit higher up towards -16, we have the gold layer. So go here for a lot of gold. Then at 0, which is pretty much the new all-purpose layer, but still not that good for everything, is where you find a lot of lapis. So go here if you want a lot of lapis. Then for emeralds, just go as high as you can in mountains, because it gets rarer and rarer as you go. But fortunately, you can still get your deep slate emerald ores. Then over here for copper, you have a lot of copper, and way more in dripstone caves. So it's the most common ore now. So for coal, just go right about here at like 140, or go to about 104. So you find a lot of coal there. Same thing with iron, just go pretty high up, or go to 16. Then that's most of everything, and of course we still have the Badlands stuff going on. But we have large copper veins and large iron veins. So what these are is very huge veins containing granite and copper, or with the occasional raw copper block, or tough and deep slate iron ore with the occasional raw iron ore. So a lot of stuff is going on here. So let's look in game. So I've done some mountain excavation using the /fill command. And looking on the inside, you'll notice that there's a lot of coal, a lot of iron, and a significant amount of emeralds. So if you want coal, or iron, or emeralds for that matter, go very high up. It also seems that my night vision has run out, which is a more accurate representation of how these caves are going to be seen. Now, here we are at 48, the copper layer, but we are not in a dripstone cave. And it's a pretty good representation of what you're going to find here. So, some emeralds if you're in the mountains, quite a bit of copper, but still not the most. Some iron here and there, some coal, just an okay mix of ores, but nothing too valuable. So, if you want copper, go to this layer, but preferably look for your dripstone caves, because here we are at the dripstone caves, and doing the same fill command yields a lot more. So make sure to locate dripstone caves while searching for copper, because you might just find quite a lot. Down to layer 16, the preferable layer for iron, doing the fill command yields a lot of iron, but we are also in a dripstone cave, so we're also going to get a lot of dripstone. So moving out of the way from those big dripstone caves with their non-stone blocks, we can see that we can get quite a bit of copper still, and we have a decent amount of iron. Occasionally you might find gold, and you'll still find your occasional lapis, with the emerald block here and there, just scattered about if you're in a mountains biome. So remember, there's a different layer for everything. Then over here at layer 0, where lapis is supposed to be found, we can see that there's not too much lapis, but there's a decent amount. But an important thing to note is everything starts turning into deep slate right about here. So longer mining times, but better, more useful block. That is also more explosion resistant. Along with that, redstone and diamonds can be found here in small quantities. So we can also find dungeons, of course, which is a pretty lucky find. And just everything's normal here. But the important thing to note is, although the layers below here are deep slate, you can still get every version's deep slate and normal layer. So make sure to go to the correct layer that is in your respective zone to try to find the variant of the ore you want. At the gold layer, -16, we can see that there's small amounts of gold. It's not a very preferable location for gold because simply the Badlands are just better in general, and there's the Nether too. So if you need raw gold, go to the Badlands. If you just need gold, go to the Nether. Because this layer, although it does have some gold, it doesn't have the most amount of gold. So I wouldn't recommend looking too hard. Another thing that I forgot to mention about the other ores is that when you're actually in a cave, some of them are rarer than what I'm showing because they don't like generating next to air. So key ones are lapis, redstone, well not redstone, lapis and diamonds, and occasionally iron. So make sure to also dig around a little because they don't like generating there, but aquifers are a good alternative. So all this has been pretty cool, but the part you probably are most interested about, the diamond layer. So the new diamond layer is just as deep as you can go. Along with that, it's also the redstone layer. So doing a couple fill commands, we can see a lot of redstone and a couple of diamonds. So remember to go as low as you can go. So right about here is the best layer. You can see there's a lot of diamonds and there's boatloads of redstone. So just keep looking because you'll find a lot of this stuff. Even more when you go into these nice new caves where you can see the redstone's everywhere and already mined out for you. And the new lava sea layer is now at -56 about. So be careful because digging straight down is a bigger threat with bigger lava. So that's about it with the ores. So back onto the normal caves, we have aquifers. And the cool thing about aquifers is they can have their own independent water levels. So compared to the underwater caves we had in 1.13 and above, until now, we just had them completely filled. But now, they're not completely filled. And they even come with magma, even if they don't go to the lava layer. So, it's a pretty handy thing because you can explore these and they have more ores than usual. Because ores like lapis and diamonds do not like generating close to air. So, remember to look out for your nearby underwater caves because they're unique now. Along with that, there's a very small chance that they'll be replaced with lava versions of themselves. But, as I said, they are rare, so you probably won't see them too often. But here, this is not one, but rather the lava sea. So, keep an eye out for some lava aquifers. So, I finally found an example of one, and it's very small. But this is also a good example because it's so small. You can see it's not the lava sea, and it has its own unique lava levels, just like the aquifers. They use the same code, but just with lava, which means if you had a fire resistance potion, you can go down and maybe find another cave system on the other side. So that's a nice thing about these new aquifers. Now, just some miscellaneous changes here and there. So in swamps, trees can now grow in deeper water. So, since there's going to be more water, because the new generation, of course, they're just going to grow a little bit deeper, so swamps aren't completely barren. So, another thing to note is that swamps are going to be changed in 1.19, so this change won't be long-lived. But either way, it looks pretty cool. Another change is Stony Shores now have giant strips of gravel from time to time. So we can see here, there's some gravel, which means a new alternative source of gravel. On the topic of Stony Shores, beaches have been completely reworked. So sometimes there's just not going to be a beach. Then sometimes there's going to be stony beaches like this. So they're not exclusive to extreme hills anymore. Along with that, you can have these giant jumps like this, because the new generation allows unique features to form like this because the biome doesn't control the shape anymore. So, stony shores, sometimes no shores, sometimes beaches. And sometimes beaches, for some reason, can generate inland. So, the occasional shipwreck in the middle of a desert might be possible. Another miscellaneous change is, it's not really a change, but in the deep site layer, there's no dirt, andesite, granite, or diorite blobs. There's only going to be gravel and tuff. So, you're going to have less cluttered inventories down in the deep site layer. So, thank the inventory for not getting so cluttered in the deep site layer. So, with the biomes, as I was talking about, all the hills biomes has been removed. So, here's the list of everything that got removed. So, everything seems normal, and the deep warm ocean has gone completely removed instead of being added again. This is probably because coral generating inside ocean monuments is not a good mix. But don't worry, you're still going to have deep ocean coral reefs. So, it's still okay. Everything else here is gone, including the modified jungle edge, so you're going to have to use the mushroom fields as a new flex of how rare you can find. So, there's also been some renames. So, tall birch forest, old growth birch forest, giant tree taiga, old growth pine taiga, giant spruce taiga, old growth spruce taiga, snowy tundra, snowy plains, jungle edge to sparse jungle, stone shore to stony shore, mountains to windswept hills, wooded mountains to windswept forest, gravelly mountains to windswept gravelly hills, shattered savanna to windswept savanna, and wooded badlands plateau to wooded badlands. So, just quite a few things to our biomes. Along with that, geodes only generate 2Y30, so oceans are no longer your friend in finding geodes. Badlands also, instead of generating stony peaks, they generate just their own peaks made out of stuff that you can find in the biome, terracotta, and red sand generates higher, and red sandstone now naturally generates. Along with that, a lot of texture changes have been made, but they're very small and I'm not going to be showing them off. But keep an eye out when you play the game. So, for our final miscellaneous changes, we have that mob spawning now is based on per player instead of global per dimension, which means multiplayer servers, you can now have multiple people AFKing at multiple different mob farms without counteracting each other's rates. So, this will help the caves when people are exploring to still be infested with mobs. Along with that, worlds created before 1.2 will no longer be able to be opened because of some new technical changes, which is because of world blending. Now, the newest thing to make your world still good is world blending, which is pretty much what it sounds like. So I've loaded up this entire area in 1.17, but over here is the edge. And you can see that there's some sort of transition, because this desert should be bigger, but it just naturally ends. And this is because of world blending, which makes it so that way the 1.18 terrain blends in with the 1.17 terrain. And it does so pretty well, because it just eats up a couple chunks of 1.18 terrain and just turns it into 1.17. So, sometimes you get weird things like this, where there should have been more of a shattered terrain, but instead it didn't, because it world blended instead. Besides that, we also have the caves, which don't necessarily blend well. So, you can obviously see where the chunk ends. But remember, they've put in a lot of work onto this update, so you can't blame them for not finishing the caves all the way. Because, remember, imagine trying to stitch together one piece of code that you just created with an old piece of code that's been around for years. It's not very easy. So, now we have this cave blending, but it's not too good on the sides, but on the top, it replaces your pre-existing bedrock with deep slate. So, if we go down here, it's just normal 1.18 caves. It just generates the new caves below here, which is pretty nice. Using F3 plus G in order to detect where the chunk borders are, you can see pretty hard to tell where it is because sometimes it works good, sometimes it doesn't. And looking here, it's actually quite hard to tell where the new ends and the old begins. So, looking at this, they did a pretty good job with this biome blending stuff. Another thing is, it tries to adapt the terrain as much as possible, which this shattered savanna here has been blended but used the correct biome. So, an unshattered shattered savanna has been placed here. But, of course, it still gradually continues into the new 1.18 terrain. So that way you can have the best of both worlds. Now, for the final feature of 1.18 that I deem significant enough to warrant being shown is the megaveins, which are another type of ore. So occasionally, while looking underground, above Y0, you'll find these copper veins, and they're very large. You can see that there's a lot of copper, and occasionally they'll have raw copper blocks themselves, which is very lucrative. So I've set up some commands to wipe up the area near them, and you can see they get quite big. So you'll find a lot of copper real quick if you go searching long enough for these. So remember to look out for some random blocks like these, because who knows, it might just turn into a vein, like this. Along with that, there's tough and iron variations with raw iron ore. So keep an eye out for those. Along with that, I've also found a Wobble Octopus, like this, but it's currently being destroyed by my commands, so it's not the best example, but it is an example of what it may look like. So, for the final niche details like this, we have the title screen, which has been changed a little. So, the background is now reflective of 1.18 instead of 1.17, because it's no longer just some small cave features, instead it's an entire terrain rewrite. Along with that, there's some new splashes. The yellow text that says Peter Griffin here, it might be different. So, keep looking for some of those new ones, because they're pretty funny. I mean, imagine just loading up Minecraft and just seeing Peter Griffin. Now, for our final thing, we're going to look at chunk base. Although not officially supported, we're just going to look at it. And this is what 1.17 looks like on my seed that I play survival on. So it's quite colorful, and you see what it looks like. But if I switch to 1.18, you can see there's some unique stuff going on. And you can also see the mountains are here. So mountains can be quite big, they can be quite small, and the temperature thing is quite obviously seen. No more just random blotches. Instead, they'll kind of be like a pattern. And you can see here, certain biomes are bordered by certain other biomes. So dark forests sometimes have birch forest bordering them, and jungles always have certain things bordering them, such as dark forests or plains, sometimes some beaches, and they like lukewarm oceans near them. So this entire rewrite is looking pretty cool. Along with that, another thing to take note of is with the terrain stuff going on, we also have different oceans. So your ocean shape might be different. Sometimes you'll have inland beaches, sometimes inland oceans, and just overall a massive rewrite. And it's a lot less colorful because the hills biomes are gone. But mushroom islands have been changed quite a bit. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but overall they can be huge or they can be tiny. So a lot more variation with them. So with all the major changes out of the way, it's time to end this video. If you enjoyed this video, remember, please like and subscribe. It took quite a bit of effort because, we have an entire mountain, terrain, cave rework thing. So, a lot of things are going on, so it took quite a bit to cover all this. So, with that, have an absolutely fabulous day. Enjoy our new terrain. Gearsaw out.